The Time Loop That Stops You Progressing by Daniel Comolati. A Growth Mirrors production. A note on the words. This book runs on a small number of specific terms: spirit, consciousness, the field, the gate. There are about a dozen in total. None of them are decoration, and none of them require any particular background. Each one names a function that has to be told apart from the others, and each is defined at the point where it first appears. The second chapter does most of that work. Nothing here depends on you having memorized anything. If a word gets away from you, keep going. It will be used again in a moment, and the meaning will come back with it. They are also all gathered together at the end. One other thing. There is a workbook that goes with this book. It carries the 3 procedures in full: finding your level, writing the awareness rule, and running the experiment, with the sheets and logs already laid out, so you can fill them in on screen or print them and write on them. It is free. If you are listening to this as an audiobook, it is in the video description. If you are reading it, it is wherever you downloaded this. Chapter 1. Same level, different scenery. This book is about one thing. It is about the time loop that keeps a person repeating the same level. Level in the sense a game uses it. The same stage, presented again, however different the surroundings look. The people change, the surroundings change, the dates change. Sometimes the city, the work, the money, or the ambition changes. Underneath all that movement, the same internal sequence keeps running. The same input arrives. The same program reads it. The same energy rises. The same emotion takes it. The same action follows. The same kind of reality gets built. Then it starts again. I know this because I have done it. I spent years inside loops while believing I was progressing, because the scenery around the loop kept changing. New countries, new work, new people. Certain programs were never touched. The calendar was moving. The level was not. My earlier books had to lay the ground. They had to explain a different way of seeing the whole thing. Spirit, consciousness, the brain, identity, attention, desire, and the relationship between inner cause and outer form. This one is narrower. It is not another attempt to explain the whole fabric. It goes to the places where the process fails, small moments where a person either steps out of the loop or gives it enough life to run again. There is one explanation and one experiment. The explanation shows how the loop runs. The experiment lets you point attention deliberately once you can see the automatic thing for what it is. The most important failure point can last a second. Something enters your field. By field, I mean everything live in you at that moment. Thoughts, sensations, mood, expectations, whatever is already running. A rule wakes up. Energy starts to rise. Before you have consciously decided anything, that energy is funneled into an emotion you already know, and the emotion becomes a complete reality. By the time anger has become fury, the gate has already been missed. By the time worry has become catastrophe, the gate has already been missed. By the time a knockback has become worthlessness, the gate has already been missed. Most attempts at change start too late. They start after the program has taken the energy, after the brain has gathered its evidence, after the body has entered the state, and after consciousness has brought the selected data to life. This book moves upstream. It begins before the emotion becomes a world. The loop is not the event. A time loop is not the repetition of something outside you. The events can look completely different. The loop is the internal sequence connecting them. An input enters the field. It makes contact with a rule, a belief, an expectation, or a sensitivity. That contact produces a trigger. A groundswell of energy follows. The old program claims the energy and funnels it into a familiar emotion. The emotion directs perception. Perception directs action. Action produces consequences. Those consequences are then used as evidence that the original belief was right. The loop closes. Say a person carries the rule that it always falls over. A client goes quiet a week out. The event is small, but it makes contact with the rule. Energy rises. The brain starts collecting supporting material. The deal that collapsed, the one who strung him along, the invoice that took 5 months. Consciousness brings that selected data to life. The body changes. Something drops in the stomach. He goes cold, or he chases too hard, or he quietly stops putting real work in. The other party feels the change and pulls back. It stalls. The rule now has fresh evidence. It always falls over. A different client turns up later. The program is still active. The next event just gives it another opportunity to run. This is why changing the scenery does not necessarily change the level. The level is not what is standing in front of you. It is the sequence that becomes active when it enters your field. This does not mean every difficult situation is imaginary. People do behave carelessly and dishonestly. Numbers do go bad. The point is not to deny external facts. The point is to see what happens between the external fact and the reality eventually produced from it. Without that distinction, every reaction feels inevitable. A person says, "I became angry because of what happened." That sentence hides the operating system. Something happened. A rule read it. Energy arrived. A program directed that energy into anger. Anger organized a reality. That is a very different description. The first leaves no exit. The second reveals several. Where your attention actually goes. There is one more thing this loop is costing you, and it is larger than the argument or the bad afternoon. It is taking your attention. Attention is what gives data life. Whatever you hold it on is what gets built. That is not a technique. It is how the thing works. Spirit points, the brain searches, consciousness switches on what comes back, and you live in the result. Which means the whole business of creating anything runs on one resource, and the loop is spending it. You may have tried to point that resource somewhere deliberately. The list, the board, the picture of what you wanted. And it did not hold, and you decided either that you were doing it wrong or that the whole idea was rubbish. Neither. The instrument was already booked. You cannot direct attention that is being taken from you several times a week by something you never agreed to. So the order of this book matters. First, learn not to give life to what was never consciously chosen. Then learn to give sustained attention to what is. Finding the level. One way to expose a repeating level is to look at 3 different occasions where the same result appeared. Then take out the names, the dates, and the places. The scenery falls away, and the sequence becomes visible. When this kind of input appears, I read it this way. I feel this, I do this, and I get this result. When the same sequence survives the removal of the scenery, the level has been found. Movement is no longer confused with progress. Chapter 2. Know who you are and where you are. Before the words, do this. If your hands are busy, or you are driving, or you are somewhere you cannot give it 10 seconds, leave it and come back. This one is worth having done, rather than read about. Everything after it rests on it. Notice a thought. Any thought. Wait for the next one to turn up and catch it arriving. Now notice that you noticed it. There are two things there, the thought and whatever was watching the thought. They are not the same because one of them was observing the other. You did not have to believe anything to see that. You just looked. That is the foundation of this book. Everything else is a name for parts of it. 4 words do the work in this book. They are worth learning properly because each one names a specific function, and the whole method depends on telling them apart. Spirit. Spirit is what noticed the thought. It is the operator, the one directing. It is not made of thinking, so it does not disappear when the thinking stops, which is why you could stand outside a thought a moment ago and watch it arrive. The word carries religious history, and people expect it to mean something vague or distant. Here it means something exact and immediate, the part of you that can point attention somewhere and can take an instruction or refuse it. Nothing else in the system can do either of those. Your brain cannot decide what your brain should think about. Something has to point it, and that something is what this word names. The brain. The brain is the organic processor being operated. Equipment. It searches, compares, remembers, predicts, and returns answers, and it does that extremely well within whatever direction it has been given. Notice the phrase, within whatever direction. That is the whole of its limitation. Point it, and it works. Leave it unpointed, and it does not stop. It runs whatever instructions are already sitting in it. Consciousness. This is the word most often misunderstood, so it is worth being careful. In everyday speech, consciousness means being awake or being self-aware. That is not the meaning here, and reading it that way will quietly scramble everything that follows. Consciousness is what fills the active data and brings it to life. Here is what that looks like. Your brain gathers a set of remembered facts about somebody. On their own, they are inert, items on a list. Then something turns that list into a felt certainty about who that person is, sitting solid in your chest, more convincing than anything they could say to you. That turning is consciousness. It is what converts selected material into lived experience. And this is the part that matters most. It makes no judgment about what it is handed. It does not check whether the material is true, useful, or chosen. It brings a catastrophe to life with exactly the same care it brings a future you wanted. It has no preference at all. The body. The body is the biological interface, where the active data gets expressed and experienced, chemistry, posture, breathing, tension, readiness, and it runs in both directions. The brain changes the body, and the body sends information back to the brain. 4 functions. A person cannot operate a system while believing they are the system, which is why these have to be kept apart. They are not interchangeable. Spirit directs. Spirit asks the originating question. Spirit chooses where attention will be placed. Spirit can accept an instruction, reject it, or issue another one. The brain processes. It searches, compares, predicts, associates, and produces answers. It can generate further questions, but only after a direction has been set. Spirit points it at a subject, and the brain works within that direction. Left without deliberate direction, the brain does not go silent. It keeps running the software already installed in it. Consciousness does not ask questions. It does not decide whether a thought is useful, destructive, true, or false. It fills the active data. It brings life to whatever has been selected and held. This is the function people misunderstand, because we assume consciousness is doing the judging. It judges nothing. It is not the chooser. It is what makes the chosen thing real, which is exactly why it matters so much. Consciousness will bring a catastrophe to life with the same care it brings a life you actually wanted. It has no preference. It animates what it is handed. The body expresses the result. It changes chemistry, posture, breathing, tension, and readiness according to the data being run. The brain affects the body, and the body returns more data to the brain. The body is plastic to the mind. Repeated states in the brain become repeated states in the body. A body held in threat supplies further evidence of threat. A body repeatedly prepared for conflict can begin to feel unsafe when nothing is happening. The system feeds itself. Hold that order. Spirit points or fails to. The brain searches. Consciousness switches on. The body expresses and sends more back. It is the same order whether the thing being built is a disaster or a life you chose. There is no separate mechanism for good outcomes. The heart. There is one more function, and it belongs here rather than further on. By the heart, I mean spirit's own discernment, what you know before you have reasoned about it, whether a thing is genuinely yours. It is not an emotion. Emotions are downstream. They are what a program makes of energy after it has claimed it. The heart sits upstream, and it is quieter, which is why a loud brain drowns it out. You will need it when you come to choose what to want. The brain cannot settle whether you want a thing or want what having it would say about you. It will argue both sides brilliantly all night. The heart answers immediately, and then does not argue. When the functions are confused, when these functions blur, thought becomes authority. A sentence appears in the brain and is accepted as though spirit consciously issued it. A bodily sensation appears and is accepted as a command. An emotion begins forming and is accepted as identity. I am angry, I am anxious, I am finished, I am not good enough. The operator disappears inside the machinery. More accurate statements are, anger is forming within my field. The brain is presenting anxious data. The body is producing a sensation. A program is reading this as rejection. This is not empty wordplay. Location determines authority. If I believe I am the anger, there is nothing outside the anger capable of directing it. Every option left is an option the anger gets to choose between. If I recognize that anger is a state forming within the equipment I operate, a gate becomes visible. Why this comes before everything else? Without spirit, there is no gate. The gate is a moment where an instruction can be refused, but an instruction cannot be refused by the thing that issued it. If the brain produces an interpretation, and there is nobody present except the brain, then that interpretation is simply what is happening, and the most that can be done is to build a better habit over the top of it. That is management of the machine, from inside the machine. It produces a better class of program and calls it progress. The exit is not a technique. The exit is that there is an operator here who is not the machinery, who can watch it run, and who can decline to give it energy. The brain is not the enemy. The body is not the enemy. Emotion is not the enemy. These systems are performing according to the data, rules, and direction available to them. The problem begins when the operator is absent. An undirected brain defaults to installed software. That software may have been installed through childhood, fear, repetition, imitation, pain, social conditioning, or an earlier attempt at protection. Much of it was formed before spirit had any awareness that there was an operating system at all. Most of your programs were installed by something trying to help you. The rule that you never let anyone see what you need may have been the only workable policy in a particular year. The rule that money always goes was accurate about a particular stretch of time. Software written under one set of conditions goes on running long after the conditions have disappeared. Protection becomes imprisonment. The first act of freedom is not controlling every thought. It is knowing where the operator is. Chapter 3. Know what is running. Awareness begins with intimacy. Before incoming data can be identified accurately, it is necessary to know what is already running. The field is the immediate sphere of active data. Thoughts, physical sensations, emotional tones, memories, expectations, urges, and unfinished internal conversations. Some of this data is loud. Much of it is not. A person can appear calm while a background program runs resentment. The body can hold tension that has become so familiar it is no longer noticed. The brain can repeat the same prediction for years until it stops sounding like a prediction and starts sounding like the world. This is the baseline, and consciousness is animating all of it continuously without ever asking whether any of it was chosen. Imagine entering a room where a machine has been humming all day. After a while, the sound disappears from conscious notice. It has not stopped. It has become normal. Internal programs operate the same way. A belief can run so long that it is no longer experienced as a belief. It is experienced as the world. A bodily state can be held so long that it is no longer recognized as tension. It is experienced as personality. An emotional pattern can repeat so long that it is no longer recognized as a state. It is experienced as identity. This is why awareness cannot begin only when a large trigger appears. By then, the incoming data is mixing with a field you have never examined. The first stage is quieter. It is learning the climate before attempting to identify the storm. The question Spirit asks. In stillness, Spirit can ask one useful question. What is running within my field right now? The brain then returns information, because that is what it does when it is pointed. And Spirit sorts what comes back. A thought can be recognized as brain data. A physical sensation can be recognized as body data. An emotion can be seen forming. An impulse can be recognized as an instruction requesting action. Nothing needs to be fought, corrected, or followed simply because it has appeared. Alongside that, the quieter questions. What is the brain discussing when no immediate problem exists? What is the body preparing for? What emotional tone sits beneath ordinary activity? What outcome is being anticipated? What urge keeps requesting expression? There is no condemnation in this examination. Condemnation immediately creates new data and conceals what was originally running. Spirit is not entering the field as a prosecutor. It is entering as an operator examining a live system. Something is aware of all of it. That awareness is the position. It is what allows Spirit to stay where it belongs, rather than becoming lost inside the output. And it is a position that has to be found often enough in stillness to be findable later at speed. Detecting the change. Once the internal baseline becomes familiar, incoming data is easier to detect because it creates a visible change. A message arrives, and the stomach tightens. A name is mentioned, and the brain accelerates. A certain tone enters, and heat appears in the chest. A possibility is presented, and the entire field expands. The trigger becomes identifiable because the field was known before it arrived. Only then does the distinction between incoming and outgoing data become useful. Incoming data is what enters the field through a person, event, memory, image, word, sound, or sensation. Outgoing data is what the operating system sends back through attention, language, posture, decision, and action. Between incoming and outgoing data sits the software. Chapter 4. The software between them. The brain does not meet reality without instructions. It interprets what enters through an existing structure of identity, beliefs, rules, expectations, preferences, and sensitivities. Program, software, installed material, I mean the same thing by all three. The set of rules the brain reads everything through, most of which you did not consciously write. Identity sits near the center of the software. I am this kind of person. People like me are treated this way. This is what it takes to get anywhere. Success should look like this. If they valued the work, they would have said so. These statements create rules. Rules create expectations. Expectations organize likes and dislikes. Likes and dislikes establish polarity, movement towards one kind of data and rejection of another. Action then follows the polarity. This happens so rapidly that the original rule is often invisible. Somebody sends 4 words back on something that took 3 weeks. The person appears to be responding to the message, but the message has made contact with something older. If they valued this, they would have said more than that. The incoming words are compared against the rule. The rule is violated. The violation is interpreted as disregard, or dismissal, or proof the whole thing is a waste. Energy rises. The reaction now feels as though it was created entirely by the other party. Yet the scale of the response came from the meeting between the words and the installed rule. Another person could read the same 4 words and produce a completely different reality because different software interpreted it. This does not make one person right and the other wrong. It reveals that input alone does not determine output. If it did, everyone would react identically, and nobody does. Some programs are obvious. Others exist as subtle sensitivities, a facial expression, a delay, a change in tone, a certain word, the feeling that someone has become less attentive. A small external signal can activate a large internal program. And that mismatch is usually the clearest evidence that a program is involved at all. When the size of the response exceeds the size of the event, a program is running. The software was often created for a reason. It may have been trying to protect the person from rejection, humiliation, danger, or loss. But software written under one set of conditions can keep operating long after those conditions have gone. The purpose is not to destroy every preference or remove all emotional response. It is to bring unconscious rules under conscious authority, under spirit's authority rather than the machine's. A visible rule can be reviewed. An invisible rule can only be obeyed. A rule you can see, spirit can question. What was it protecting? Does that still need protecting? Was it ever true? Would you install it today? Some survive that. Plenty of rules are good rules and should stay. A rule Spirit has examined and kept is no longer a program running you. It is a decision you hold. A rule you cannot see gets no such review. It runs, it interprets, it produces consequences, and it collects those consequences as evidence for itself. Chapter 5. The Groundswell and the Gate. The trigger and the emotion are not the same event. A trigger is the moment incoming data makes contact with installed software and creates a change within the field. The emotion comes afterwards. This distinction matters because most people only become aware after the emotion has formed. They notice anger once they are angry. They notice fear once a frightening reality has been assembled. They notice rejection once the entire field has contracted around it. At that point, the emotion already has momentum. The earlier signal is smaller. A word enters, an expression changes, a message appears, a memory surfaces. Something makes contact with a belief or a sensitivity. The field changes. A tightening in the stomach, a flash of heat, a shift in breathing, a sudden acceleration of thought, a powerful urge to speak. That is the trigger becoming active. Triggers are not necessarily negative. Good news, attraction, possibility, and recognition also change the field. When first learning the process, painful triggers are easier to locate because they produce the strongest contrast. The trigger is useful data. It reveals exactly where external input has met internal software. The error is immediately following it. A trigger does not have to become an instruction. A sensation doesn't have to become an emotion. An emotion does not have to become an action. Awareness creates separation between these stages. That separation may last less than a second. That fraction contains the beginning of choice. The groundswell. Immediately after the trigger, there can be a rapid groundswell of energy. It may feel as though it begins at the feet and surges upwards through the body. It can arrive in pulses, doot, 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 gathering force before the mind has completely named what is happening. This groundswell is not yet the finished emotion. It is energy carrying information and requesting direction. The installed program moves quickly to claim it. If the trigger has activated a rule connected to disrespect, the energy may be funneled into anger. If the rule concerns abandonment, it may become panic. If the rule concerns humiliation, it may become shame. If the rule concerns having no say, it may become helplessness or resentment. If the rule concerns not being enough, it may become anxiety. If the rule concerns standards, it may become contempt. That last one is worth noticing, because contempt does not present as a state at all. It presents as an accurate assessment of somebody else. The program gives the energy a familiar channel, and once the energy enters that channel, the emotion begins constructing a world around itself. This is why the groundswell is such an important point. It is one of the last moments in which the energy has not been completely assigned. The energy itself is not the enemy. Rejecting the automatic program does not mean suppressing the groundswell, pretending it is not there, or forcing the body into artificial calm. Suppression says, "This energy must not exist." Awareness says, "This energy exists," but the old program does not automatically own it. The energy may be needed. It may be used to establish a boundary, leave a situation, speak clearly, protect something valuable, or take decisive action. The difference is that spirit directs it, rather than allowing installed software to seize it. This is like electricity entering a system. Electricity does not decide which machine it will power. The existing circuit determines where it goes. The groundswell does not decide that it must become fury. The active program provides the circuit. If that circuit can be interrupted, the energy becomes available for another use. The gate, between the groundswell and the completed reaction, is a gate. At this gate, the old instruction can be accepted or rejected. And this is where the second chapter earns itself, because rejection requires someone to do the rejecting. The brain cannot decline its own interpretation. It has no position from which to decline. Spirit can, and spirit is the only part of the system that can. Usually the acceptance is automatic. It does not sound like a formal decision. The brain presents an interpretation. The energy enters it. Consciousness animates it, and the person is carried forward. The gate disappears inside the speed of the process. To reject the instruction does not mean rejecting reality. It does not mean pretending the words were not spoken, tolerating harmful behavior, or abandoning discernment. It means refusing to let the first installed program make the decision. The most useful initial response is often extremely simple. Do not act yet. Do not send the message. Do not raise the voice. Do not sign. Do not walk out. Do not make the accusation. Do not commit to the first interpretation. Hold the energy without giving the old program control of the body. This is difficult to improvise during the groundswell. The brain is already accelerating. The body is changing. The emotional channel is opening. So an awareness rule needs to be established beforehand. An awareness rule is an instruction spirit installs while the field is clear. If this particular signal appears, I will not follow the first reaction. I will pause, observe, and direct the brain to examine the data. The rule does not have to produce enlightenment. It only has to keep the gate open long enough for the operator to arrive. This is where the process becomes almost like a game. The level presents the familiar input. The program begins loading. The energy rises. Can the gate be found before the automatic reaction completes? Initially, awareness may arrive afterwards. Later, during the reaction. Then as the emotion begins forming, eventually with the first physical pulse. Every earlier interception is progress. The objective is not to condemn the missed gate. Condemnation merely adds another automatic program. The objective is to find it one frame earlier when the level returns. Chapter 6. When emotion becomes a world. A state is not only a feeling. Once it receives enough energy, it becomes a temporary reality. The mechanism is always the same, whatever the state happens to be. The program claims the energy and names it. The named state then gives the brain a search instruction. The brain searches faithfully and returns everything that supports the state. Consciousness brings that selection to life. The body enters the matching condition, and your ability to perceive anything that contradicts it narrows to almost nothing. What is standing in front of you is no longer the whole of it. It has become a collection of evidence supporting the state, and anything that does not fit is filtered out before it reaches you. Then you act from inside that world. The action produces a consequence, and the consequence is handed back to the program. Look what happened. I was right. The program never mentions the part it played in producing the outcome. This is consciousness giving life to active data without judging whether the data was deliberately selected. The brain supplies the evidence. The body supplies the force. Action gives the internal reality external form. The loop is complete. It doesn't always look like a temper. If you are reading this expecting a book about losing your temper, this is the point to slow down. Anger is the easiest version to see, which is why it gets used as the example. It is loud, it announces itself, and everyone in the room knows it happened. Most of the expensive channels are quieter, and several of them do not feel like emotion at all. They feel like accurate perception. Here are 4 that cost people years. One of them is probably yours, the one that is done to you. Input. Something goes wrong, or somebody makes a decision without you. The rule underneath is that things happen to you, and you have no real say in them. The energy is funneled into helplessness, or the resentment that sits next to it. The brain is then instructed to find every occasion on which you had no say, and it finds plenty because it is looking. The action is a version of waiting. You complain, or you withdraw, or you explain to somebody how unreasonable it all is. What you do not do is the one thing that would test the rule. Nothing changes. The rule collects that. And this one is dangerous because it never feels like a state. It feels like realism. You are not being dramatic. You are simply describing the situation accurately. And you are because the brain went and got you an accurate, carefully selected description. The one where you are not enough. Input. A short reply. A silence. Somebody further along than you. The rule is that you are not enough, or that you will eventually be found out. The energy becomes anxiety, or the flat drop of shame. The brain is instructed to find evidence of inadequacy, and returns it in volume, because that evidence exists for everybody. Then the action, and it is usually an absence. The thing does not get sent, the question does not get asked. The work gets reworked for the 9th time and never leaves the desk. Or you over-explain until the other person wonders what is wrong. The thing does not land because it never went out. The rule collects that too. The one where they are beneath it. Input. Somebody doing it badly, somebody getting credit, somebody not seeing what is obvious to you. The rule is about standards, and underneath the standards is separation. The energy becomes contempt, or a dismissal so quick it barely registers as a decision. The brain is instructed to find their inadequacy, and finds it immediately. The action is usually to disengage. You stop asking. You do it yourself. You conclude the conversation is not worth having. Then you are on your own with all of it, which proves nobody was up to it. This one is the hardest to catch, because contempt doesn't feel like a state either. It feels like discernment. It feels like having high standards in a world that does not. The one that is already over. Input. An early sign of a problem. The rule is that it always ends badly. The energy becomes dread, and the brain is instructed to run it forward, which it does, competently, all the way to the worst version, gathering the times it went that way before. The action is to protect yourself against an outcome that has not happened. You hedge, you pull back, you start something else. You say the careful thing instead of the true one. The hedging changes the outcome. The rule collects that as proof. The channel is not the point. 4 different states. 4 completely different-looking lives. One mechanism. Input meets rule. Energy rises unassigned. Program claims it. Brain gathers. Consciousness animates. Body follows. Action lands. Consequence confirms the rule. Which is the useful part, because it means you do not need a different method for each. You need to know which channel is yours, where in the body it announces itself, and where the gate sits. A boundary may still be necessary. A conversation may still need to happen. Someone may genuinely have behaved badly, and something may genuinely be about to fail. But a decision made by spirit is different from a decision issued by a state. Whether that state arrives as fury, as helplessness, as dread, or as the quiet certainty that these people are not worth the effort. One belongs to the reality we intend to create. The other belongs to the level we have already repeated. Reconstructing it afterwards. Once the state has settled, the whole event can be reconstructed without blame. What was the exact external input? What meaning did the software add? What changed first in the body? Which emotion claimed the energy? What evidence did the brain begin collecting? What action followed? What response did that action produce? Which belief was strengthened by the outcome? This is not an exercise added to life. It is how a completed loop becomes usable data. The point is not guilt. It is to locate the instant at which a different direction would have produced a different world. What it costs. The greatest cost of missing that instant is not a single argument or mistake. It is time. A reaction may last 10 minutes, but its reality can continue for days. The brain replays the event. The body continues carrying it. Conversations are imagined. Work is neglected. Sleep is affected. Opportunities pass unnoticed because attention remains attached to the loop. Then there is the repair. Messages have to be explained. Relationships have to recover. Decisions made inside an emotional reality have to be reversed or endured. One trigger can consume an entire section of life. And here is the part that connects to everything in the second half of this book. Those days are not merely unpleasant. They are days in which your attention, the instrument by which anything gets created, was fully occupied building a world you did not choose. When the same program operates repeatedly, the cost becomes enormous. A person may spend years moving between emotional triggers, believing each one is a separate problem. This person disappointed me. That work undervalued me. I was not ready for that one. Nobody there was any good. It was never going to happen anyway. That city was wrong. This arrangement became impossible. Beneath the changing circumstances, the same rule may be receiving energy again and again. I have done this. I have mistaken the intensity of an emotion for proof that its interpretation was true. When the feeling is strong enough, it does not present as an interpretation. It presents as perception. It feels like seeing clearly for the first time, which is exactly what a fully loaded program feels like from the inside. I have allowed a temporary state to direct long-term decisions. I have changed external conditions while carrying the program responsible for recreating the experience. New country, new company, new circle, and the sequence waiting patiently for the next input, because input always arrives. The painful realization is not simply that a mistake was made. It is that years can be spent repeating a level that might have been exited at the gate. This must not become another source of self-punishment. Shame about lost time is another loop capable of consuming more time. It has all the same parts, and it runs beautifully in people who have just understood something important about themselves. The correct response is responsibility. The years reveal the importance of the mechanism. They provide enough repeated data to make the pattern unmistakable. Experience becomes useful when it is converted into awareness. A life is not wasted because a loop existed. It is wasted only if the loop remains invisible and continues running. Chapter 7. The Exit. The best time to prepare for a trigger is before it returns. During the groundswell, the brain is operating under pressure, and the old program is already claiming the energy. That is not the moment to invent an entirely new response. The work is done beforehand, through triangulation, taking a fix on something by looking at it from 3 separate positions. One event can be misunderstood. 3 or more similar events reveal the recurring structure. Spirit deliberately directs the brain to compare them, and asks the same short set of questions of each one. What kind of input began it? What interpretation appeared first? What rule was present every time? Where the groundswell began in the body? Which emotion claimed it? What action followed? What consequence reinforced the program? Note the order. Spirit asks the originating questions. The brain then searches, compares, and can generate further questions from that direction. Consciousness does not perform the questioning. It brings life to the data being selected and examined. That order is the whole of the method, and almost nobody uses it. Most self-examination is the brain interrogating itself, which produces a great deal of activity and very little movement. Triangulation converts a vague emotional problem into an identifiable operating sequence. Instead of "I have a confidence problem," the sequence may become: when somebody irate does not respond to something I sent, an old rule tells me it was not good enough. My chest goes hollow and my thinking speeds up. The brain begins gathering every other time my work was passed over. I rewrite it, or I do not follow up at all, and the thing dies from silence rather than from judgment. That sequence can be intercepted. Confidence problem cannot. There is nothing in it to catch. The same conversion works whatever the channel. When a project hits its first real obstacle, an old rule tells me it was always going to fall over. Something drops in my stomach. The brain runs it forward to the worst version and collects every time it went that way. I hedge, or I quietly start something else, and I stop putting real weight behind it. When somebody does the work badly, an old rule tells me nobody here is up to it. Something in my jaw sets. The brain gathers their every failure. I stop asking, I take it on myself, and I end up carrying all of it alone. Each has a specific input, a specific rule, a specific bodily signal, and a specific action. Those are coordinates, and coordinates can be found again. From them, an awareness rule can be installed. When my chest goes hollow after silence on something I sent, I do not rewrite it, and I do not drop it. I first establish what was actually said, what meaning I added, and what else the silence could mean. This does not guarantee that the other party is innocent, or that no action is required. It guarantees that the action will not be chosen by the oldest available program. Triangulation is preparation at the level of software. It gives spirit a previously established instruction to reach for when the gate appears. Polarity. Rejecting an old program creates an opening. It does not automatically create a new direction. If the energy is prevented from entering its usual channel and no alternative is selected, the brain will circle back and offer the same instruction again, usually with better arguments. This is where polarity becomes functional. Polarity just means the two ends of a scale. The software organizes much of reality that way, by attraction to one end and rejection of the other. Love and hate, trust and mistrust, calm and fury, expansion and contraction, acceptance and resistance, clarity and confusion. When a trigger is located, the first task is to identify the pole towards which the program is moving. Then ask, what is the opposite pole? If the program is moving towards fury, the opposite may be understanding, calm authority, or clarity. If it is moving towards helplessness, the opposite is agency, the smallest thing here that is actually yours to do. If it is moving towards not being enough, the opposite is sufficiency, or simply accuracy about what was really said. If it is moving towards contempt, the opposite is curiosity. What would make a reasonable person do that? If it is moving towards dread, the opposite is the present tense. What is actually true right now, rather than in the version that has not happened? If it is moving towards chaos, the opposite may be order. This is not forced positivity. It is not replacing an unpleasant fact with a pleasant fantasy. Polarity provides a direction for the energy. Spirit selects the pole and directs the brain to search for the data required to move towards it. The brain does not need your mood to cooperate. It needs a direction. Instead of asking, why is this always happening to me, which is a search instruction and an extremely effective one, and the brain will return a great deal of material, Spirit may ask, what has actually happened? What else could this mean? What action would belong to clarity rather than fury? What boundary would calm authority establish? The brain now has a different search instruction. It begins locating different data. Consciousness brings that data to life. The body receives a different signal. A different action becomes available. That is the same sequence from Chapter 2, running deliberately for once. The next available point, the full opposite pole, may not be immediately accessible. Moving from fury directly into love is unrealistic in the moment. The opposite establishes direction. The next available point provides the action. The immediate movement may be the state. Pause. Observation. Clarity. Understanding. Deliberate action. Whatever the state is, fury, or the certainty that it is already over, or the flat conviction that you were never going to be enough for this. The old program wanted one uninterrupted movement from trigger to state. Polarity places another path inside the sequence. The selected pole becomes real through action. If the next point is pause, the action may be silence. If it is observation, the action may be one clarifying question. If it is clarity, the action may be a boundary stated without accusation. The question is always functional. The old reality wants me to do what? The reality I intend to create requires me to do what? The level returns. A recognized level doesn't always disappear immediately. It returns. The people may change. The words may change. The environment may be completely different. Yet the same internal coordinates appear. This can feel like failure. I thought I had already dealt with this. But understanding a program intellectually is not the same as intercepting it under energy. The level returns because active software is still available to run. Its return provides another opportunity to locate the gate. At first, awareness may arrive 3 days after the reaction, then 3 hours afterwards, later while the argument is happening, then during the first emotional surge. Eventually, Awareness is present when the field first changes. Progress can therefore be measured by the distance between activation and awareness. The level may look identical from the outside, but internally the operator is arriving earlier. That matters more than anything visible. The first time a trigger is caught before action, even if the emotion remains strong, the loop has been interrupted. The external outcome may be small. No message is sent. No accusation is made. No dramatic exit occurs. But the usual consequence is missing. The program does not receive the same confirmation. A different piece of data enters the system. This trigger does not control the action. Repeated interception begins installing a different expectation. The brain learns that the old rote is no longer automatic. The body learns that energy can be present without immediate discharge. And spirit remains in the position of operator, which is the actual result. The level is completed not when the trigger never appears again, but when the same trigger can no longer produce the same unconscious reality. The complete movement. The exit can now be seen as one continuous movement. Know who is operating. Know what the brain is. Know what consciousness does. Know what is already running within the field. Detect the change created by incoming data. Catch the groundswell before it is fully assigned. Reject the old instruction without rejecting the energy. Direct the brain to examine the program. Identify the active polarity. Select the opposite direction. Take the action belonging to the intended reality. Then watch what changes. Sometimes awareness will arrive afterwards. Use the event to triangulate. Sometimes the emotion will already be running. Look for the earliest point at which direction can still be recovered. Sometimes the level will return with different scenery. Recognize the coordinates. The objective is not to become a person who never feels anger, fear, pain, or disappointment. The objective is to stop allowing automatic states to decide which reality will receive life. Every intercepted trigger recovers time. Every rejected program prevents an old world from being rebuilt. Every deliberate direction gives the brain new work. Every selected action begins producing different evidence. Eventually, the event that once consumed days may consume minutes, then seconds. Then it arrives, is recognized, and passes through the field without taking control. The level has not been escaped because the world stopped presenting the input. It has been escaped because the input can no longer operate the system. The scenery can change without the pattern following. Time can begin moving forward again. The energy once used to repeat the past becomes available to create what comes next. Chapter 8. From unconscious input to deliberate input. Once an automatic reality can be interrupted, another question appears. Can reality be directed deliberately? This is where many people become uncomfortable. The language of consciousness, attention, and reality programming can sound irrational. A person may fear that questioning the conventional explanation of reality means abandoning logic itself. What if this is all nonsense? What if I believe something ridiculous? What if I let go of logic and lose my grip on reality? The fear can be extreme. A person may imagine that following this line of thought will make them mad. That reaction is understandable because the conventional operating model feels safe even when it is failing. Logic appears to protect the person from uncertainty. The first impulse is therefore to reject the entire premise, rather than test one small part of it. An enormous belief does not have to be accepted. A small confirmation can be observed. I first noticed this through something as ordinary as a baseball cap. I had a New York Yankees hat in Sydney. At the time, it did not seem common. I liked that it was official and relatively exclusive. Part of the value I placed on it was the idea that I was one of the few people wearing it. Then I began seeing Yankees hats everywhere. The object upon which I had placed attention appeared to multiply throughout my experienced reality. I decided to test the pattern with something less common. I bought a Detroit Tigers hat. It was much harder to find. I could not simply walk into a shop and buy one, so I ordered it online from an authorized Australian distributor. Initially, it seemed genuinely exclusive. Then Detroit Tigers hats began appearing. I noticed more people wearing them. Shops that had not stocked them appeared to start stocking them. Another example occurred in the bush. I saw a four-wheel drive with an additional rear axle, 4 wheels at the back instead of 2. The extra axle not part of the drivetrain, what is commonly called a lazy axle. It stood out because it was unusual. After noticing it, I began seeing similar arrangements everywhere. What happened? Did my focus cause more of these objects to enter my external reality? Were they already present, but invisible to me until attention instructed the brain to locate them? Did attention alter my behavior, routes, and decisions in ways that increased contact with them? Or is the relationship between consciousness and external form larger than conventional explanations allow? The first confirmation does not need to settle every part of that question. It establishes something immediately useful. Experienced reality changes according to the data repeatedly selected for attention. The brain receives an instruction to locate something. It begins comparing incoming data against that instruction. Patterns previously discarded become visible. Relevant conversations, objects, pathways, and opportunities begin receiving priority. Consciousness brings the located data to life. Focus is not passive. What you have already been doing. This is the bridge between escaping an unconscious reality and beginning to create a deliberate one. Until automatic triggers are interrupted, attention is repeatedly captured by pain, threat, resentment, fear, and unfinished emotional data. The person is already programming reality. They simply did not issue the instruction. The brain keeps receiving the same directions. Find the threat. Find the rejection. Find the disrespect. Find the proof that I had no say in it. Find the evidence that I am not enough for this. Find what is wrong with them. Find proof that this will fail. Consciousness then brings the located data to life, without ever asking whether the instruction was chosen, and the person lives inside a world made almost entirely of real evidence, all of it selected, all of it confirming what was already believed. That is not a quirk of perception. That is reality being built correctly from an instruction nobody consciously gave. Once attention is recovered, it can be given another subject. Earl Nightingale taught a simple version of this principle. Clearly identify what is wanted, keep it before the mind, and begin noticing the routes leading towards it. He added something that most people skip over, and it is the part that actually does the work. When the thing starts showing up, be pleased about it, not analytical. Pleased. Because its appearing means it is moving closer to your hand. That sounds like sentiment, and it is not. It is mechanism. Recall what consciousness does. It fills whatever has been selected and held, and it makes no judgment about the material. Delight is one of the most reliable ways of holding something. Nobody has to be disciplined about attending to what they are pleased by. It happens on its own, and it happens repeatedly, without effort, which is exactly the condition sustained attention requires. So the excitement is not a reward for the thing appearing. It is what keeps the instruction running. The opposite is also true and worth watching for. Meet an early sighting with suspicion, or with the reflex that says it means nothing, and you have just handed the brain a different search instruction. The attention comes off the thing and goes on to the doubt, and the doubt is what gets sustained. Which is why the first sighting matters so much more than its size suggests. The principle can be tested without beginning with an enormous desire. The experiment is deliberately small. Its purpose is both confirmation and clarification. It confirms that sustained attention changes experienced reality. It clarifies whether the selected desire is genuinely yours. Chapter 9. The Confirmation and Clarification Experiment. Choose one thing you genuinely want. There is no judgment and no condemnation. It does not have to sound spiritual, noble, responsible, or impressive. It can be whatever the hell you want, provided the desire is real. Consult the heart. Do I actually love this? Do I genuinely want to experience it? Or do I want what I believe it will say about me? That distinction matters. The original attraction to the Yankees hat may have included the hat itself, but it also included exclusivity. The deeper desire may not have been only for an object. It may have been to possess something distinctive. So the experiment does two things at once, and this is why it is worth the weeks it takes. It confirms that sustained attention changes experienced reality, and it clarifies whether the thing you selected was ever really yours. Why it is deliberately small. You do not begin with an enormous desire. An enormous desire arrives carrying every program you own. Doubt, urgency, identity, the fear of wanting it out loud. You cannot read a result through all of that. Something small and specific gives you a clean signal, an object, a piece of equipment, a place, not success, and not a better life. Those are too vague for the brain to triangulate and too vague for you to measure. The instruction you are giving. You collect about 10 images of the chosen thing and keep them somewhere you will actually look at them. A folder on your phone. An album. A folder on the desktop. Not 10 versions of the same image. Dimensional data. If the desire is a car, the front grille, the side profile, the rear, the interior from the driver's seat, the dashboard, the way the door opens, the storage space, the materials, the details, the car, in the sort of place you would actually drive it. A complete representation from every angle. The brain needs something to chew on. A vague instruction produces vague searching. A high-resolution instruction gives it enough to triangulate the thing into something coherent and begin presenting it as a three-dimensional possibility inside experienced reality. 10 is deliberate. 100 images sounds more serious and works worse. At 100, most of them get seen once and never again, and what you end up with is an afternoon of collecting rather than an instruction being held. At 10, you see every one of them many times over. Repetition is what holds an instruction in place, and 10 is small enough that you will still be looking at them in week 6. Keep it off the platforms. Do not build this on Pinterest or on anything else designed to hold your attention. The reason is mechanical rather than moral. A platform is built to keep you there, not to keep you on the thing you chose. Give it a signal, and it will immediately start feeding you adjacent material, near misses, alternatives, other people's versions, whatever holds a person like you the longest. That is a second instruction, and it is not yours. You would be running an experiment about directed attention inside a system engineered to redirect it, and you would have no way afterwards to tell your own result from the platform's contribution to it. A folder on your phone has no opinion about what you should look at next. That is the entire requirement. Spirit has supplied the direction. The brain does the rest without supervision. Then use the imagination. The images are data about the object. Now you supply data about having it, and for that you need the faculty this book has not yet named. Imagination is not a lesser activity than perception. In the terms of the second chapter, it is the same machinery running with one difference. Ordinarily, the incoming data arrives from outside you. Something enters the field. The program reads it. The brain furnishes what it has been directed to find. Consciousness brings that to life, and the body responds to what has been made real. In imagination, spirit supplies the incoming data. That is the whole of it. It is the one point in the system where you are not reacting to what arrived. You put it in directly. And the reason this does anything at all is the thing established about consciousness at the start. Consciousness makes no judgment about what it is handed. It does not check where the data came from. It brings a memory to life. It brings a fear about next Thursday to life, and next Thursday has not happened either. It will bring a scene you furnished yourself to life in exactly the same way, with the same body, the same chemistry, the same felt reality. That is not a loophole you are exploiting. It is the same indifference that lets a program assemble a catastrophe out of selected evidence and hand it to you as the world. The mechanism runs in both directions. Until now it has mostly been running in one. Close your eyes. There is a practical reason, and it is not ceremony. Your field only holds so much. With your eyes open, the room is pouring incoming data into it every second, and the furnished scene has to compete with all of it. Close them, and the competition stops. What spirit has directed becomes the only thing in the field, which is exactly the condition consciousness needs to animate it properly. The mind's eye is simply where the brain presents what it has been asked to furnish. Everyone has one. If you have ever worried about a conversation that never happened, you have run it at high resolution, in color, with dialogue, and you did not have to be taught. The faculty is not in question, only the direction it has been pointed in. So, build one small scene. Small is the instruction, not a concession. Take the car. You are driving it, and a friend is in the passenger seat. He says, "This is a great car. Do you like it?" Your hands are on the wheel. The window is down a couple of inches and the air coming in is colder than you expected. Something you actually listen to is playing. And underneath all of it is that smell a new car has, which you would know anywhere and could not describe to anybody. Notice how little happens in that. Nobody achieves anything. There is no moment of arrival, no handing over of keys, no scene in which you finally get it. That is deliberate, and it is the part most people get wrong. A scene about finally getting the thing is a scene about not having it yet. The wanting is still the subject, and wanting is what gets held. An ordinary moment in which you already have it, and it is not remarkable, is data about having it. Unremarkable is the target. Use every sense you can reach. Each sense is another channel of data, and the brain furnishes whatever it is directed towards. Give it one channel, and it produces a picture. Give it 5, and it produces a place. What is under your hands? What the light is doing? What you can hear that is not the main thing? The road noise, someone in another room, the wind. Temperature, which people almost always leave out, and which does more work than any of the visual detail. Smell, which is the one that makes a scene stop feeling like a picture. And what is being said. A line of dialogue anchors a scene faster than any amount of description, which is why the friend in the car has a sentence. You are not straining to see any of this. Straining is a different instruction entirely. It is effort, and effort carries the information that the thing is not yours. You are simply returning to the same short scene and letting it fill in. It will fill in. The first few times it is thin, and half of it is missing. Over weeks it acquires detail you did not deliberately add, which is the brain furnishing the scene rather than you assembling it. The resolution goes up on its own. That is the point at which it stops being an exercise and starts being a place you can go. And notice what has happened by then. Spirit has directed. The brain has furnished. Consciousness has brought it to life. The body has responded to something that never entered through the senses. That is the entire sequence of this book, running from a direction you issued, rather than from an input the world happened to send. When to do it. On waking, and again as you are going to sleep. There is a reason, and it is not mystical. Either side of sleep you pass through a drowsy band, alpha sliding down into theta, where you are neither properly awake nor gone. The critical, sorting, arguing part of the machinery is offline. Whatever you put in front of you at that point is taken without much of an argument. It is the same easy absorption state childhood ran on, and that is worth a moment because it explains a great deal. A young child's brain does not run at the adult waking frequency. It runs slower, in the same drowsy territory an adult only passes through on the way into sleep, and it does not settle into the adult pattern until somewhere around 7. So a child does not visit that state twice a day. A child lives in it. Which is why so much of what is installed in you went in before you were 7, and none of it was checked at the door. There was nothing at the door. The part that sorts, questions, and argues had not been built yet. Some people have used that deliberately. Tiger Woods had a golf club in his hands before he was 2, and was on national television not long after. His father ran the instruction constantly, and by design, and the target was never a good golfer. It was the best in the world, put in during the years when the door stood open. Most child prodigies have some version of that behind them. Somebody was supplying an instruction while the state was still receptive, and the child was not in a position to examine it, which is the same reason it worked and the same reason nobody consented to it. You no longer have the open door. You have 2 narrow windows a day. The transition into sleep has a name. Hypnagogia. Thomas Edison reportedly worked that edge on purpose. He would nap in a chair holding metal balls in each hand, with pans on the floor beneath them. As he slipped over the edge, his hands relaxed. The balls dropped. The noise woke him, and he would immediately write down whatever had been in front of him in that half-awake state. He was not trying to sleep. He was trying to be in that band, awake enough to keep what was there. You do not need the metal balls. You are already in that state twice a day, at the 2 moments you are least likely to be doing anything deliberate with it. Most people spend both of them on the day's unfinished business, which is an instruction too, and it is running whether or not you chose it. 2 or 3 minutes at each end. The scene, not the wanting. Then let it go. What you are watching for. 2 different things, and they must not be counted together because they are 2 different claims. Noticing. The object itself appearing. More of them, more often, in places you had not seen them. Pathways. A route. A person. A supplier. A piece of information. An opportunity. Something you could act on that was not visible to you before. Noticing is the smaller claim, and ordinary explanations cover a good deal of it. Attention marks something as relevant, and your perception starts flagging what it had been discarding. Pathways are where the more interesting question lives. And pathways are also the ones that change your life, because a route can be walked and a sighting cannot. When either kind starts appearing, meet it properly. Write it down, because you are running a measurement, and the measurement needs the entry. But do not stop at recording it. Be pleased about it. It is moving closer to your hand, and being pleased is what keeps your attention on it, which is the entire instruction you are trying to sustain. The cold, skeptical response to a first sighting feels rigorous. It is not. It moves your attention off the thing and onto the question of whether any of this is real, and then the doubt is what gets held. Keep the log honest. Keep the attention warm. Those are not in conflict. Where to write it down. You have now been handed a measurement to keep. A count before you start, a control running alongside it, and 2 columns to sort what turns up. All of that is already laid out in the workbook, along with the 2 procedures from the first half of this book, finding your level and writing the awareness rule. It is a separate document on purpose. A book is read. A method is worked through, returned to, and written on. Those are different things, and they sit badly on the same page. The sheets are built so you can type into them and save, or print them and write on them. It is free. If you are listening to this, it is in the video description. If you are reading it, it is wherever you downloaded this. If you are only going to do one thing with the rest of this chapter, get that and start the 14-day count. Everything after this point is easier to understand once something is actually running. Why you run it twice? Once now. Once after 8 weeks of the interception work in the first half of this book. Anyone can tell you that attention shapes what you experience. What almost nobody gives you is a way to test whether recovered attention shapes it differently. That is the claim this book is actually making. Not that focus works, that the loop has been spending your focus, and that getting it back changes what focus can do. The number that will tell you most is not how many objects you saw. It is how many days you held the board before your attention drifted off it. In the first run, most people last 9 or 10 days. If the second run holds materially longer, you have your answer, and you produced it yourself, completing it. Spirit supplies a deliberate direction. The brain triangulates and locates corresponding data. Consciousness brings the active data to life. The body and attention become familiar with the selected reality. When an actual pathway appears, action completes the process. Attention makes the route visible. It does not walk it. This is the first deliberate reality. First, learn not to give life to what was never consciously chosen. Then learn to give sustained attention to what is chosen. Do not spend another year repeating the level. Find the gate. Take back the energy. Choose the reality that receives life. Then move. The words in one place. Here they are together. If you are listening rather than reading, there is no need to hold any of this. Every one of them was defined where it appeared, and this is only here for the times you want to check something quickly. Spirit, the one operating. What notices a thought arriving? It directs attention, and it can accept an instruction or refuse it. Nothing else in the system can do either. The brain, the equipment. It searches, compares, predicts, and answers, and it works within whatever direction it has been given. Consciousness, what makes the selected material real to you. Not being awake and not self-awareness. What turns gathered evidence into felt certainty, and does it without checking whether the evidence was chosen. The body, where all of it shows up and gets experienced, and which sends information back the other way. The heart, what you know before reasoning, whether something is genuinely yours. The field, everything live in you right now. Thoughts, sensations, mood, memories, expectations, urges. A program, an installed set of rules the brain reads incoming events through. Also called software or installed material in these pages. The same thing. The level, the stage you keep repeating, not the circumstances. The internal sequence that runs inside them. A trigger, the moment incoming data makes contact with a program and changes the field. The groundswell, the energy that rises immediately after the trigger, before anything has claimed it. The gate, the moment between the groundswell and the reaction, where the old instruction can be refused. Polarity, the two ends of a scale. Fury and clarity, helplessness and agency. Triangulation, taking a fix on a pattern by examining 3 separate occasions of it.